All right, welcome to the In the Loop podcast. Episode 18, we talked about integration.
Welcome to In the Loop podcast, where we talk about things that are in the loop.
In the loop, yes,
And today's topic is integration.
Integration. And we had an episode about integration. And we said, hey, what do you mean by that? And we talked about the fact that the owner-operator integration is really integration of engineering data with SAP, Maximo, operating system, other systems.
Yeah, that type of integration, like a high-level integration, kind of.
Business, I think we called it.
Business integration.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
And then there's integration of data, like, where you use data analytics and you use a warehouse, you bring it together and you integrate it together. In a data-friendly format.
Kind of like what, I guess, Aviva Engineering would do.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, sort of neutral.
Yeah.
And can consume all kinds of data from a whole bunch of different places. And then you've got integration further upstream in the process, which is at the design tool usage and integration, to where you feel like you author something once and you push it around from one tool to the next, and you have this sort of kind of map, this sort of perfect workflow where you're minimizing data entry, and you're reusing data, or you're promoting the one-stop shop sort of scenario.
Authoring tool integration.
So 3 totally separate discussions. Okay.
Yeah. I think most of the time when people in the engineering space talk about integration, they're talking about authoring tool integration.
I think that word, those letters, when they are typed or said, that is the expectation of most engineers, designers, and whatnot. You say those words, you're talking about all the way up there at the design tool integration.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, let's say you have a new client, somebody who has never used one of these smart engineering tools. So they've done all of their previous work in like AutoCAD drawings, MicroStation drawings, Excel files, Visio work files, something. They've done projects in those. So they're obviously just independent files, and you create the project, right? And so if we go into an office and introduce the idea of a smart P&ID tool, or a smart instrumentation tool, or a smart 3D model, generally there's like a basic default sales pitch on what's the value of those tools, right? Like, hey, it's a user interface for multiple people to work simultaneously. Standards are in there. Drafting guidelines, quality control, and then you can automatically generate deliverables from that. So the sales pitch is, it's a better way for many people to collaborate on a project. So you adopt a software, and it helps you, whether it does better calculations, whether it does better reporting.
Yep.
It's that's a generic sales pitch for a smart engineering tool. But then kind of the next question is, well, did those things just completely tie together? Is it just one? If I say smart P&ID and smart instrumentation, is that just one system?
Yeah.
Like one software package? And the answer to that is no, it's not. They're separate packages. They can be used standalone, and they often are. And so then the question is, well, what's the impressive part of that? I thought they were all just going to work completely seamlessly together, right? I think
I thought I was going to get in there and design me a P&ID, and then it populates my instrument list over here in instrumentation, and my motor list and my electrical, right?
That's the question that comes from the audience, right? Right. And the answer to that, let's just say, like in the Octave case, in the Octave hexagon story, right? Because we could talk about Aviva or Bentley or whatever. Let's talk about that story, because we see a lot of that in this market we're in here, in the U.S. based market. And then there was a product smart plant foundation that actually was supposed to be the glue that tied those things together and made them act like one product, right? That was part of a pitch, like a sales pitch from say 10 years ago.
I think longer than 10 years ago.
Okay.
But
Yeah, you're right. 15 years ago,
Yeah.
20 years ago. Right. Okay.
Yeah. You're
that,
old.
That would have been the answer,
You've
right?
been around the block a while.
Correct. Yeah, that would have been the answer. And you say, okay, well, essentially then they're all locked together and they work as one. And that's kind
you're
of the,
supposed to publish your PNID up into the F foundation, and then you can retrieve some data down into instrumentation, or you can retrieve it over into your 3D model, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Now, as long as I can remember, that was the primary sales pitch for SPF, was that it was the integrator at the design level. Is that correct?
Yeah, when you say sales pitch, I would say value proposition.
That's a nice way to say it.
So I would
Value
say
proposition.
The primary value proposition from my point of view in that is that's what it was for. It was for to integrate the authoring tools to create concurrent engineering workflows, right? So if I'm a PNID guy and I'm gonna update the PNID, then that update's gonna transfer over to the instrument group or the electrical group or the piping group in your model or whatever needs to be done, and then vice versa. If I'm over here in instrument world and I update something, it's going to transfer to the other tools as they need it to be done, and they called that concurrent engineering.
Publish,
right?
Retrieve.
Publish it up from the authoring tool into Foundation, retrieve it down from Foundation into the needed authoring tool. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that had.
I thought that was the value proposition.
That sounded like the value proposition. Now, we've seen, we've been through various scenarios where that has been used in that fashion, like you described, very detailed, and other places projects where it kind of was intended to be used, but it didn't really work out based on the personnel, or maybe there wasn't enough time to set that all up.
Well, I think where I've seen it used the most is what I would call the publish and compare. I think that's the correct technical term. And so you published it from the authoring tools into that foundation layer, and then you ran comparison to the other authoring tools, and then you kind of created like a gap analysis.
Okay.
Right.
Right. And so
the retrieval part of it, maybe you weren't doing that, but you were definitely publishing the data.
Okay. Because the retrieval part of it had a few challenges in terms of one person waiting on another, one discipline waiting on another. You really had to commit to this idea of the publish and retrieve.
Yeah, I think in theory, I think it sounds like a great process. I'm going to do this task here, I'm going to publish it, and then I'm going to retrieve it over there. In practice, though, when you're starting an engineering project, right, you have multiple disciplines, and they kind of all start that race at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have like necessarily an instrument engineer waiting on all of the tags coming from the PNID for two reasons. One, the PNIDs might not be done yet. They might not have all the tags on the PNIDs, right? So all the bubbles might not be populated. And then just generically, there's more instrumentation normally than is even shown on a PNID, right? So especially for like assembly items and stuff like that, right? Like you might just show a valve on a PNID, but in reality, there's a positioner there. There's some kind of switch there. You know what I mean?
Correct. Those are implied items. Yeah.
But they're in an instrument index because they still have to be spec'd out or whatever, right, to order. So I think in practice, there was challenges to that because they're all kind of starting that race together, and they can't wait. Hey, you gotta create all the PNIDs before I can work on my motor list, or you gotta create all this before I can work on that. Yeah.
Well, I think you got different types of projects too. I mean, most of the projects that I got started on were offshore oil and gas platforms, and those had been done Like Mustang had done those. That was their specialty since the late 80s or the
Yeah.
early 90s. So when you're the best, you've got hundreds of platforms under your belt that you've executed, in 10 and 15, 20 years, and you're like the leader in that. Well, then and you didn't execute anywhere like what you're describing, right? You did have, I mean, you didn't execute in that integrated fashion. You executed with, elbow grease, hard work, super checks, a bunch of people working as fast as they can, right?
You
And
dating yourself on
lean and
purpose.
mean. Yeah, I always date myself to show this
Super checks.
immense amount of history and expertise. But what I mean is, then if you try to you say, hey, we got this new way of working, and it's going to involve, number one, we're going to set up this data library between everything, and we're going to set up these interconnections, and then we're going to, instead of everybody kind of starting that way, we're going to do it differently. We're going to let this person start, and they're going to do their job, and they're going to publish it, and then we're going to retrieve it. And that was a culture shock, I think.
Yeah.
If you take totally like a project that was lean and mean, and then you say, well, you got to use this new tool, and maybe this whole new emerging scenario of a data manager. There was no data manager on a project, from the past, right? Maybe there was a handover manager, but there really wasn't like an internal data manager type person. So it's new people, it's a new process. Anyway, some projects and companies didn't really fit too well with maybe that, which sounded like a utopian type idea of publish and retrieve. They struggled with it. But then I've kind of seen some other jobs, particularly nuclear, where maybe there were more regulations and and controls on the project. Maybe the funding strategy was different, or the culture was different, and maybe that hard line publish retrieve model was more conducive to that type of project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And like you're talking about publish and compare, that's a fairly that's a compromise there, right?
That's a compromise.
You're saying
kind of, yeah.
I'm gonna do the integration, but I'm not really gonna use it to write a bunch of data back and forth. I'm gonna use it to analyze the data. And it's going to provide me some cool visualizations of what matches and what doesn't. But then the people will make the choice on how to fix that and resolve the issues through their normal methods of opening their tools and adjusting it, republishing it, and comparing, and ultimately working toward a cleaner comparison to where we can say, okay, good, we've approved it, right?
Yeah.
Which is a little different than publish and retrieve. Fundamentally. So you've got that sort of publish retrieve concept, which intends to create kind of like one tool, kind of all glued together. You get the publish and compare, which is kind of like a data warehouse type scenario. And so we just it wasn't like, some things are like obvious, right? Like, oh, at some point the industry went from making physical models to a 3D data model in software. And it was like, light bulb, that's just what we do now, right? We're just not gonna make any more physical models, right? Because it doesn't make sense. But with this integration concept, it hasn't been just a light bulb, oh, that's obviously right, because the complexity of it didn't make it feel like it was just the obvious answer. If you had the right people and the right culture, you could make it work. But if you didn't have the budget and you had a slightly different culture, it could also not work.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the 3D scenario went through some ups and downs, but at some point there was just a hard line, and they're like, no more sticks and plaster or whatever the heck they were doing. They were just like, shelve that idea completely. It's all going to be in the software. I don't think you had a clean moment where you could just say, oh yeah, obviously the integration concept is like a no-brainer. We have to do it everywhere. Is that fair?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I think I think to a certain extent, when we talked about those different levels of integration, specifically on projects. So I think even when people were doing it manually, there's still a level of integration that they were doing. That integration level just got better with the publish and compare and the analysis. And I actually think the more you're integrated in that level, the better off you actually are, because that allows your actual experts to make the decisions that they need to make instead of being forced decisions being made upon them.
Okay.
So the value proposition there to me would be the publish and compare, not necessarily the publish and retrieve. But I think when people talk in the industry, and the kind of, I don't want to say utopia idea, but the utopia idea, I'm going to call it that, is hey, I'm going to update this in this specific tool, and it's going to propagate and update all of the other tools with whatever bits of information those tools might need. I think that is the value proposition. Now I think there's a whole nother flip side of that where the actual value proposition for integration is more of a information management, like change management value.
Okay.
Doesn't even have to have the authoring tools necessarily.
Okay, right. So we were in a meeting recently where there was some shock and surprise in the room because for the last 10 minutes or so, we've been talking about foundation and what its perceived value proposition was. And to me and you and many of our colleagues, it was almost exclusively around that design tool integration, the publish, retrieve, publish, compare strategy. Correct? Like that's what it's kind of its identity.
Yeah.
And then
my whole career, man, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Is it the primary value proposition was integration from a tool perspective, specifically for like Smart Plant Foundation, right? Like that was the value proposition.
Okay.
If you used it, you were integrating the tools. Whether you're integrating the tools to just do a publish and compare or do a publish and retrieve, the value proposition is that you were integrating those tools.
That was what you thought the
That's
identity.
what I thought.
Okay.
And then that conversation, my mind was blown.
Because we had somebody on the call with a lot of history in the development, somebody on our team who was part of building the app.
Yeah.
From the early 2000s. And the statement that confused us or surprised us or shocked us was, hey guys, stop talking about the design tool integration because it wasn't even designed for that up front. The original idea was more of the warehouse retriever to build a masterclass library to receive all the data and allow it to flow out to the downstream parts of the project. So it wasn't even really about the tying the tools together during the actual drafting or the data entry. It was about the after effects and pulling it together.
Yeah. And then sending it downstream and managing the
connecting
change.
to procurement, connecting to material management, all that sort of stuff.
And then managing the change between all of those as that information would change.
But I've been in 100 meetings on this topic, and all 100 of them, until that discussion, focused exclusively on integrating up early in the drafting and data entry part of the project.
Yeah, I think for me, what the mind blowing is the fact that I was under the impression.
I thought it was born there.
I thought it was born there. And then somebody was like, hey, bro, no, you have it backwards.
That was like, we decided to do that later.
What?
Because that's what people kind of wanted to hear. But truthfully, it was a data compiler and a builder of the master data set.
That blew my mind.
For then change management, configuration management, all that. I was like, great. That makes complete sense to me because that part of the equation, the idea of gathering the data, checking it, quality checking it, packaging it to give to other, Like, I don't think anybody argues with a service in the middle of the project to do that. I mean, there are other vendors that have tools that do that.
100% no.
Power
Yeah.
BI, SQL warehouses can do that. If Foundation can do that, like that sounds like a good idea for everyone.
Well, and so yeah, you're right. There's a bunch of other people, and I think this is where. So Foundation was kind of the start of it, right? And then it's morphed now because it went from Foundation to SPO, and then it went from there into some other stuff like SDX, right? And I think now it's SDX 2.0. And yeah, you're right. There might be some other applications or solutions out there that talk about it, but I think the perspective that it started from with that type of integration wasn't just a document centric integration. It was more of a data level integration for information management, right?
Because prior to that, you were accumulating documents for handover.
Yeah, so I think it
you
actually
were creating data books, which were full of documents, and this was a time when you now would create tagged objects, and they'd have a relationship to documents.
And so I think hearing that explanation, well, holy crap, that makes a lot more sense on the actual like life cycle and how it is now SDX 2.0, because that is a large value proposition, because a lot of the other solutions out there start with the document and then work backwards to the data, where I think its original idea was to start with the data and then work towards the document.
But
right?
We're still talking about the data kind of in the middle of the project, like after the tools.
Yeah, 100%.
But like the identity that was out there on the market, all the conferences we went through, everybody we talked to, almost every conversation was, hey, how do you push it from one to the other? Internal. How do I draw this symbol right to push it to this tool? How do I correlate it between these two?
Yeah, so
that was like every conversation. And then to hear someone say, hey, that wasn't even the reason it was built. That came somewhere in the middle, was weird to me. It was shocking.
It was pretty shocking. I was shocked. But now it kind of makes more sense, and I kind of understand it more. So the question there is, okay, well, now where do you go from there? Right? So if that is the value proposition, then you set it up and you configure it in a way with that mentality in mind first, and then the tool integration second. Does that kind of make sense? Because a lot of people in the industry, right or wrong, I think had the original impression that it was tool integration.
And if you didn't do that, it was a failure.
And so you set it up to do tool integration first. And then all of that other stuff that we just talked about with the information integration that was like a secondary. The primary was the tool integration.
Yes.
Well, okay. I actually think it makes much more sense to do it the other way, though.
Flip it around. You're 100% guaranteed that you can get value out of pulling the information together into the appropriate, data sets to feed to check it and to hand it over and to feed the rest of the project. Like there's a 99% chance that's going to succeed. The design integration, though, based on culture and people and locations and budget and schedule, that does not succeed at a 99% rate.
Well, and I actually think if you take that secondary approach that we're talking about, the one you just described, doing that one first, you are more likely to succeed in the tool integration, because then you are more likely to understand what information from the tools you actually need to integrate to provide value. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe you don't, because when you start with a tool integration, you're like, okay, well, I want the entire PNID to be, all the instruments to be published straight into SPI, all the piping to 3D, all the, you know what I mean?
You go too far so early, and you get all tangled up, and then somebody's like, I quit. We're going to do it the old way.
Exactly.
Right?
Whereas if you start from that information integration first, understand what information you actually need, what information is coming from what data source, well, then maybe you don't need everything out of PNID. Maybe you don't need everything out of SPI, and you still integrate them then, but you integrate them specific for your purpose, right?
Okay.
And I think you'll be way more successful at that.
Yeah, because the thing that was so funny about that discussion was we were discussing a success story, right? A project where integration was a success and involving the SPF SPO tool, right?
Yeah.
And halfway through the meeting, it came to light that that project didn't even use the hexagon design tools.
No.
It was using other applications,
Yeah.
and all there was a data map from those other vendor apps into Foundation. And then it was a huge success beyond that. And I was like, wait a minute. The way that it was sold to me is that success had to start at design integration. It didn't just get to happen post design tools. It had to be back there, and that was the whole reason. That was its identity. That was its strong suit. That was its job. It's like, you're telling me that you did a whole job and it was the most successful job you were ever a part of. And
Didn't even have the authoring tools.
no, totally different source. You just mapped it in.
Yeah.
And then SPF SPO was a success. I was like, well, that's a great story.
It's a
I love
great
that story.
You should tell that to everybody.
Yeah, you used it as the data warehouse, the tagged doc manager,
Yep.
the integration point.
Change management control, all that stuff.
Yeah, because in those projects where I say that maybe people went, they tried it and it didn't work out that well, most of them were failing on down at the tool level, getting frustrated by the delays or the complexity. And it was like, because you started with like the hardest, one of the harder things first, but there's an easy value proposition at that data gathering spot.
100%. And I think that's what I was saying. I think if you started there, I think you would be more successful with the tool integration. And then it's like a win-win, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So I mean it was pretty mind-blowing to me. That's why we're talking about it right now, because we want everybody to know about that.
Yeah. Well, there's also a very interesting topic because there's now, you mentioned it, SDX and SDX2, which are essentially the newer
Predecessor?
No, they're the successor.
They're successor
to that responsibility.
Yeah.
And so we're in a bit of an interesting spot where there are a few projects now getting started using the SPF tool, because those other tools are still newer on their integration capabilities, but their data warehousing and data compilation tools are functionalities already in place.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting scenario there. Where do you make the investment? What's the right roadmap?
Yeah.
Because it's not a direct upgrade, right?
No.
No. Yeah. From the SPF SPO architecture to the SDX and SDX2 architecture.
No.
Okay. And I'll be honest with you, like there was a time a couple years ago where that integration concept, it kind of paused for a little bit. It really wasn't that big a topic because most people were waiting.
What are you talking about? COVID time period or something?
No, what I mean
the
is
whole world took a pause on everything.
No, I just mean the SPF like usage, like terminology usage, the references slowed down, and there was like an intentional moving over to SDX, but then now nuclear is coming back, and nuclear seems to be more well positioned, I guess, to match with that closer integration style.
Yeah.
And SPF is popping up again. It's like, okay, but that tool's kind of on its way to being, replaced. So it's an interesting
with SDX.
Yeah. And I mean, I know, like, for example, we were talking to Aviva about their new Aviva Connect,
Unified Engineering.
Unified Engineering.
Yeah.
And dude, the entire sales pitch was basically the design integration. It was to draw the pump once, automatically pull it into another app, pull it in, make one change, have it reflect in other tools. Do you know what I'm saying? It was the same story.
Same story.
It was like
Different flavor, same story though.
exactly.
Yeah.
So like that story, but it seems like you mentioned Aviv Engineering earlier, like in that middle ground there where you're managing change, you're managing quality, you're managing relationships. And there's a lot of value there too. It's just funny how dominant the design tool topic seems to be when this term comes up.
Yeah, I think that resonates with a lot of people though, specifically in the project space, because the idea is maximum efficiency, right?
Yes.
Like if I can design something one time over here and it propagate everywhere else, well then think of the efficiencies I'm gaining by that.
It is a message that is well received
Yeah.
if you pitch it.
The logistics of it is, I think, what is in question, right? That's why I said it's not. In theory, yeah, it sounds great. Value's incredibly high. In practice, all the teams start at the same time, and so if you try to do too much of that type of integration, then you put like a chokehold on your teams, and they can't actually get their work done effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So then your integration efficiencies are dropping because you're strangling your team so much.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big deal.
Okay. Well, we did one early discussion on this, and it really was just focusing on you talking about integrating during the project or after the project.
Do we ever get any comments from people? We should ask for comments. Like, you guys have comments on this? Do you have your own thoughts? Let us know what those are. And
or if you want to come
talk about them.
come on and
come on,
tell your story
about it. Yeah,
you think
we'd love to talk to people about how they've done successful integration within their world, right? Within their project, within whatever they're trying to do, how they've done it. That'd be a neat conversation.
I agree. I think we said in the beginning, the idea here was to talk about things that are relevant to the industry and that a lot of times don't get out in the open. They kind of stay behind closed doors. And so it would be better to have, we would take the feedback and say, hey, if you're missing the point on something, come on, tell us why, help us learn from that. Because I don't know, you think you know everything. You think like the 99% sales pitch on SPF was design tool integration. Then you have somebody tell you, hey, that wasn't even why it was built. Like, what?
I like those conversations though, because it does help you learn, right? So if you have some ideas like that, yeah, I'd like to hear them. Because man, that was a neat conversation, and yeah, I thought it was a good conversation.
Okay, great. And you liked that conversation, huh?
I did. Again, I liked it.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and let us know if you have any comments.